Cool, yeah.
All right, so today we have Stephanie from Evarvest. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Could you give us an overarching view of what Evarvest do and what problem you're solving?
So we're kind of like the Spotify of global stock trading. So we make it really easy for young and beginner investors to start investing. And we also support them with education. So we actually started with a free investment education hub that really supports people to understand what does the industry jargon mean, what are some of the opportunities out there for them to invest in, and how does the industry jargon really affect their portfolio and them as an investor. So the problem that we're solving is we're trying to make investing and investment education accessible to the world. And we do that by removing barriers to entry and making investing easy, accessible, and community driven.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of the germ of the idea, I mean, where did the idea actually come from, and what kind of inspired you to start this?
So the idea really came from my own experience with investing. So I first started investing about 10 years ago, and I still remember my mum's wise advice of invest in companies that people need.
Yeah.
And so I invested in my local bank. But one of the things that I found was there's very little education to self-educate, and there are some great resources for education, but they're still a little bit too complex when you're just starting out. So that's sort of where the education came from. And in terms of the product, it was about the need for a more accessible platform. So when I first started investing, it cost about $25 in brokerage with my local bank, and then it was a minimum of $500 per trade. But then if I wanted to access more broader markets like the London Stock Exchange, I needed $20,000 to open an account, and then it cost me $200 in brokerage. So really high barriers and really limited accessibility.
That's amazing. And in terms of Evarvest and other mainstream apps like Robinhood, I mean, your focus is on the 18 to 35-year-old market, right?
Yes.
In terms of demographic, I mean, how poorly is this demographic kind of catered to from a trading standpoint?
Well, I think, there are a lot of great apps out there, but a lot of them are still really too complex and still quite costly. So we've got great companies like Robinhood that you mentioned that are really trying to remove those barriers to entry and being sort of at the fore of that change.
Yeah.
So that's great, but so far Robinhood is available only in the US. So we're really focused on underserved markets, and that's why we're starting predominantly in Europe, because there is really low barriers to, there's very, very high barriers to entry, and there's really limited accessibility. So we really want to be able to change that and support those underserved markets and the young investors in those markets.
Previously you mentioned education being a big part of Evarvest. Would you be able to kind of highlight in terms of your strategy, how does your strategy kind of help education and the users that are using your product?
So we started, as I shared a little bit earlier, we started with a free investment education hub, and that's really about helping people to understand what the industry jargon means, how it affects their portfolio, and then some of the opportunities out there for them to invest in. So all of that information is accessible via the app. So it really does give people the ability to look at different stocks that they want to invest in, read the news applicable to those stocks, and then if there's terms that they don't understand, they can then go into their education and really get supported to understand what the terms mean and how they affect them.
And I think I spoke to one of your previous colleagues who's here right now. You guys don't offer leverage, do you? So
No.
Yeah, and that was intentional, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think leverage, if you're a really experienced investor, you can utilize that to benefit your portfolio. But a lot of people aren't experienced, and so we want to really act in the best interests of our customers and support them to understand how to first invest before trying more sophisticated ways of investing.
In terms of, like, say, your business model, I mean, how does that work? I mean, there has to be some sort of, you have to be commercial somehow, right? So, I mean, would you be able to kind of break down how you guys make money?
Yeah, sure. So we're offering all of the US stocks commission free, and that's really to help remove those barriers to entry. But then we do have a couple of ways that we do make money. So we do charge a small margin on FX at the time of the trade, which is still cheaper than going with a traditional institutional bank. So still trying to remove those barriers to entry as much as possible. Even though we do offer all of the US markets commission free, we do charge a small margin on the brokerage costs that we get charged to access other markets. So if you were here, say in the UK, and you wanted to use a traditional institution to access the London Stock Exchange, you'd pay about £10. So with us, on a £100 trade, it would be 10 pence. So really trying to make it accessible for everyone. In terms of the other revenue stream that we have an optional instant trade fee. So if you want to place your trade instantly in the market, then it's 75 pence. But if you're happy to wait until the end of the trading day, when we can aggregate those trades together, so it's more cost effective for us as a company, we then offer that fee free.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of the exchanges, like, what exchanges are you guys planning on offering?
So we have access at the moment to more than 30 stock exchanges around the world.
Oh, wow.
But upon our launch, we're offering all of the US markets, the London market, and also the European markets. And then from there, we'll start to expand more broader. The reason that we haven't offered them upon launch is we really want to ensure the performance of the app, and so we want to see how it functions with an amount of trades going through and users on the app before we start to add in more content.
Would you be able to kind of highlight the demographic you're testing the app on right now?
Yeah, sure. So we're doing some alpha testing internally, and so within our team we have sort of a broad range in terms of ages, but our core focus to begin testing with is university students. So being able to support them in terms of gaining practical work and investment experience, but then also to help align our product roadmap in line with the needs of the next generation of investors. So that's also part of our testing quality assurance. So what we do is we have 3 rounds of testing. We have technical testing, we have functional testing, which is with universities, and then we have a quality assurance testing round, which is where we open it up to our seeders investors that have joined our mission and backed our round. So from there, then we release to the general public. So we really ensure the ability to have a great functioning app and a really good sound user experience.
Yeah, amazing. In terms of the regulatory environment in the UK, and how has the regulatory environment in the UK and Europe kind of helped or hindered Evarvest? I understand you guys are in Lithuania right now. Would you be able to kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So our first license we're obtaining is in Lithuania. So by the Bank of Lithuania, we're obtaining a financial brokerage Class C license. And we chose Lithuania because, given Brexit, so I said it, because of that, we wanted to make sure that we still have the ability to grow. So Lithuania has, and the Bank of Lithuania has the fastest licensing time in the EU. So if we wanted to get a full license here in the UK, it would take about 12 months. Whereas in Lithuania, it takes a maximum of 6 months with an average of 3. And it's also becoming a bit of a fintech hub. So companies like Revolut, Google have just obtained licenses with the Bank of Lithuania. And then of course we have the passporting rights. So it gives us the ability to start expanding into the rest of the EU. So we found that they've been a great support for us. So particularly coming from Australia, it's a completely different regulatory environment. So having that accessibility to the regulator is really important for us to really understand what we need to be adhering to, given that we are operating in a highly regulated space. So we have found that the FCA is also really helpful. We do have a couple of partners in case of Brexit, depending on what happens there. So we do have the option to still get licensed in the UK, because it is a market for us, and particularly a market that we want to support in terms of education and accessibility to other stock exchanges around the world.
That's really interesting. What are like the regulatory differences between, say, Australia and, say, Lithuania?
So one of the main differences is, or a great example of one of the main differences is KYC. So in Australia, you need to get a kind of like a signature from a solicitor, and then that confirms that your passport is who you are. And so that's completely different from Lithuania. It's very manual still in Australia, whereas Lithuania, they're focused on sort of video verification. So being able to automate that, but also have the security of having a video to make sure that, someone isn't forcing you to sign up to the app or things like that. So it is a lot more technologically advanced, which is really where the world is going.
In terms of, are there any like regulatory changes you would just be really excited to see here in Europe?
So I personally really like that there's a lot of regulation changing to unify regulatory frameworks internationally. So we've seen the FinTech agenda by the EU, and that really aims to unify those regulatory frameworks. So as a result, we're going to see more globally accessible companies. And when companies become globally accessible, the competition is no longer local, but it's global. And that's a really great thing for consumers, and it's something that actually starts to define an industry. And we're now seeing that because of the globally accessible nature of fintechs, we're starting to see that now expand into the capital markets. So you've probably seen in the US, where a lot of the big brokers are reducing all of their fees down to zero, and that's really because of the globalization and a lot of the increased competition that's coming into effect.
I mean, there's a ton of money flooding into the fintech sector in the UK right now. How have you found the fundraising process?
Well, I think Europe is still a little bit behind in terms of like the US, but I think we're starting to really change that. I mean, you've got some really great companies that have come out of Europe, like Revolut, TransferWise, and so it is really starting to change, which I think is a really great thing ultimately for consumers. But we've only raised one round, and we did that with Seeders, and we thought that was a really great thing for us, and it has been a really great thing for us because we've been able to be supported by people that are going to be our users, and that's also really helpful from a product perspective because we start to be able to understand a little bit more about the different market needs in different countries. So a lot of our Seeders investors are placed all over the EU, and as we're expanding, there's not just sort of regulatory considerations, but they're just simply market needs that we need to understand. So for example, even in the EU, even going from or expanding from somewhere like Lithuania to Poland, it does give us that option to understand what that market is really going to need. So in Poland, as an example, if you're trading, you need to, for your end of year tax return, calculate the FX at the time of an international trade. And that's very different from the requirements in, say, Lithuania. So it's being able to adapt to that market need, and a lot of brokers in Poland don't actually offer that. So it also gives us that other element of being more competitive and making sure that we are really fulfilling a market need as we expand internationally.
How have you found fundraising on like Seeders as opposed to going down the mainstream VC route? I mean, and was there a specific thinking behind it?
Well, I think it's still the same as what I just mentioned. Is we get to tap into sort of a knowledge network, and also we also get supported, and our round is supported by people that are going to be our users. So it helps us to grow as a company more generally, and it also does help us to really define and shape the product.
That's amazing. And are you guys planning on getting FCA regulated at some point in the future?
Depending on Brexit, yes.
Okay, fair enough. In terms of Evarvest right now, where are you guys right now? Obviously, you're going to have to guard what you say, but in terms of from a product and a company standpoint, would you be able to give us like a brief overarching view of where you are?
Yeah, sure. So we're just about to apply for our license. So it's a really exciting time for us, and we're expecting a launch in Q1 of next year, pending that we do have Christmas and New Year. So we are expecting that worst case scenario, it could be a little bit delayed, but that's sort of the ideal best case scenario for us, which is really exciting. We're also really excited about some of the features that we're working on. We really are sort of upgrading the architecture to handle the level of scale that we expect to have next year as we expand into 6 different markets. So we're really sort of getting prepared for our launch, and then also working on some features. So some of the things that you'll be able to see next year is definitely more education, which really aligns with our mission of supporting investors, young investors, to become wise and confident investors, and then also still removing those barriers to entry. So Fractional is something that we'll be releasing soon after our launch.
From an education standpoint, and the education hub, are you guys creating all of the content yourselves, or? So
we write all the content ourselves.
Oh, wow. So
as you mentioned, one of my colleagues is here today, and he writes a lot of amazing content for us, also helping to break down what's going on in the world from an investment point of view. So we have a bi-monthly newsletter that he writes, and then I also write some of the content, and some of our other team members also write content. So we have a bit of a diverse range of content. We've got over about 100 useful and practical insights now on the education hub, and we're really looking to expand that out to also educate people on some of the things that we need to adhere to from a regulatory standpoint. So things like what are KYC and how does it affect you as a user.
Over the last couple of years, cryptocurrency has come to the helm of everyone. I personally lost a bit of money from it because I'm stupid. Do you think cryptocurrency is going to be a part of your future roadmap further down the line?
So at the moment, we haven't been looking at cryptocurrency. There has been a really big bubble, and I think the benefit that's come out of that sort of exuberance around cryptocurrency is it started to make a lot more people aware of investing, which I think is a really good positive thing that's come out of it. But for us, there's quite a few regulations that are changing to really, I guess, regulate that market, and that's something that's a consideration for us. We want to sort of see where that market is going to head, see where sort of the trust element is going to increase, because a lot of people are sort of not sure or not trusting cryptocurrency, and so we want to see where the market goes first and see if it's really something that our users want, and then it will be a consideration. Yeah,
that's interesting because it's quite popular amongst the demographic amongst your users anyway.
Yeah.
So, given the fact that your users are between 18 and 35, I mean, how does design really play a part in building your product? Because the other traditional apps, Robinhood, they're a little bit more complex to use, and I definitely find them quite complex to use anyway. So does design kind of play a big factor in how you guys build your product and your product philosophies?
Definitely. So we're very user-centric, and I think successful companies really do need to focus on the right product and adapting that product to their users. And in terms of sort of what we put on our roadmap, we really focus on sort of where the world is going. And where the world is going is largely defined by consumer trends, and those consumer trends are largely defined by the next generation of consumers, their needs and their wants. So we really focus on their feedback, and that's also partly why we focus on testing with universities, so that we can understand what younger generations are going to need and want. And so far we've really focused on a simple user experience so that the vast majority of people can actually start investing, because that's one of the problems in this space, is there's some great products out there, but they're usually too complex for the majority of people, particularly if you're starting out.
Yeah, and your thinking behind testing with university students, was your thinking if they can use it, then pretty much anybody else can use it?
It was partly that. So typically most people that start university, they've just finished school, and normally in a lot of countries you need to be 18 to open a trading account. So it means that we can really start at the beginning of that journey and understand sort of how simple is the app, are there things that are too complex. So even some of the things that we ask through our beta testing is we kind of educate a little bit on how to actually look at the stock chart, and then still gain their feedback on, is this too complex? And then also on top of that, are there any bugs that you've experienced with the app while going through that process?
Closing that education gap must be really difficult. So when users actually go into the app, like are they directed to the library first, or is there a specific process they go through before they begin to start trading?
So normally what people will do when they download an app is they want to have a look around. So we've kind of based in terms of the testing, we've focused it more on what people's natural user experience is going to be. So they go onto the app, they want to have a look around, and then we sort of prompt them on things that they might want to have a look at. So if they're looking at, say, Facebook or Apple stock or one of the other brands that they use in their daily lives, then it's also sort of a prompt of, have you thought about sort of looking at the news feature or scrolling down a bit to see the news on this app? And then, if they're looking at the news, don't understand what some of the terms mean, how about you head on over to the Education Hub? So really sort of making it dynamic and almost kind of like they're speaking to a person.
In terms of other product features, I mean, when I had a look at the website, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys have like a feature where you can follow other people's portfolios. That's pretty cool. I mean, is that feature live right now with your beta users?
Yeah, so we have the feature in the app, and we're building it out for when we roll out into universities in that round of testing. So at the moment we're testing more internally, but that feature is a really great feature, which I personally love as well, because it really gives you the ability to see what other people are investing, what your peers are investing in, and it really starts to make investing social. Whereas for a lot of times now, I know growing up, there were 3 things that my parents always said you never talk about, which was like politics. So I've said Brexit, religion, I haven't touched on that yet, and then money. So I think we've kind of really grown up in a era where we don't really discuss finances too much, and we really want to be able to change that, because younger generations, you know, you've got the sharing economy, they're starting to see what other people do. There is some great content that's coming out on like YouTube or Instagram, and so we really want to be able to support people in their natural sort of daily life, so being able to follow what brands people are buying.
It's an incredible feature, mainly because it engineers network effects, and so like you know, I remember watching a podcast, and actually with quite a famous VC, and they talked about product innovation versus marketing innovation, and that's a big marketing innovation you guys are doing, because engineering network effects across your current demographic can enable it to grow really quickly. And it kind of coincides with the current trend of like people wanting to share what they're trading, and stuff. Are there any other features you'd like to talk about before we go into our quick fire round?
I think one of the other features I'd really like to highlight is our easy picking stock playlists.
Interesting.
Yeah, because we really want to be the Spotify of global stock trading, where you can choose whatever stocks you want to buy, but you still get that support. So if you're looking for specifically commission-free stocks, there'll be a playlist for that. If you're looking for, you know, green energy stocks, if it's something that aligns with your values that you want to invest in. So one of the trends that we've noticed is younger generations, about 90% of millennials, I think it was a NASDAQ report, 2016 NASDAQ report on millennials, that said 90% of millennials are not driven by money. And that's wildly different from any other generation. So a lot of the time it's not so much about the product, it's about what the product stands for. And so people are starting to invest in companies that really have an impact on their daily life and then the greater world around them. And so the easy picking stock playlist is about helping them to be able to find companies that they really want to invest in, that they can support. Because a lot of younger generations, they support these companies and these brands as consumers, and the best way to support them, which they're starting to now shift and understand, is by investing in them, because it gives them the capital to start continue rather to change and adapt to their product, which really has a great impact on their daily life as a customer.
That's amazing. And there's a couple of apps in America where you get to buy stocks fractionally, because students can't afford a Google stock right now, or an Amazon stock. Do you see that being a part of your future roadmap?
Definitely. So that's one of the first features that we'll be releasing after our launch.
Oh wow, okay. That's brilliant. Yeah, because now we can actually afford a Google stock and an Amazon stock.
Exactly. I think also fractional is an amazing thing, because it does remove those barriers to entry even further, and it gives people the ability to, as you said, buy companies that they believe in. I mean, Amazon is an amazing company, particularly as well, they're able to go into multiple different industries and be really successful. So I think one of the greatest examples of that is when they decided to buy PillPack, a pharmaceutical company. I think that day a lot of the other pharmaceutical companies, their stock prices dropped because Amazon is such a good competitor, and have really shown that they've been able to go into a lot of different industries and really master them.
How have you seen like consumer trends amongst your current users when it comes to Tesla, these popular stocks? Because you said social change drives a lot of the stock market amongst your demographic. Have you seen people go bananas over like the Tesla stock recently, or?
So we're just testing internally, so I don't have too much insight
on that. Is there anything else you want to cover? Or? No. Okay, so we can go to the quick fire round.
Sure.
Yeah. Most valuable purchase under £100.
Ooh, I think the most valuable purchase would actually be investing in the stock market. I have to say that, no. I really do think it's...
Favorite stock?
It's something that continues to grow in value, so it's kind of the gift to yourself that keeps on giving in a lot of respects. Favourite stock, I actually really like Atlassian as a product and as a brand, and I think they've done really well in terms of technology and making it more accessible to startup companies, a lot of the great products that bigger companies have. So I really like them as a stock. I have a little bit of a diverse portfolio. I also quite like Intuitive Surgical. They're focused on robot doctors, so they're really changing the medical space. Which
Are
is
they based here or in India or something?
Intuitive Surgical.
Yeah.
They're listed on the US stock market.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a really interesting company.
Yeah. Is there a book that you would give to a fellow fintech startup founder?
I would. There's probably two I would gift. The first is Shoe Dog. It was written by the founder of Nike. Brilliant book, and it has a lot of valuable insights into the journey an entrepreneur goes through. The other book, which I'm halfway through, but I still think it's a really good read, is I can't quite remember the title. I think it's That Would Never Happen, and it's written by the founder of Netflix. Also a really good read on the journey of Netflix. Yeah.
That's an incredible company. A lot of entrepreneurs have kind of spun out of that company, like they have with Google. Most valuable advice you've received?
I think the most valuable advice that I've received is to understand where you want to go, because when you understand where you want to go and sort of you have a vision, it then largely defines all of the choices that you make from there.
And what's your most valuable failure that in hindsight has kind of set you up for success?
My most valuable failure, I think probably I see this as a failure, even though it may not be in other people's minds, and I don't see it as a failure because I've gained so much out of it. But in my last business, I brought on a business partner, and it really showed me that sometimes visions don't align, and how much that can really impact a business. And so with Evarvest, we're really focused on people that have the same vision to make education accessible, make investing accessible, and so it means that together as a team we have much more cohesion because we're all working towards the same outcome, and I think that's really important.
Amazing. And what gives you the most joy doing what you're doing? Because I was going to ask you relief, but there's no relief being a founder.
So I think the joy really comes from having an impact on people, and really, I mean, we get quite a few comments of people saying we can't wait to use your app, and we already love your education. And for me, I think that gives me so much joy because I know how much I struggled to self-educate and how much I struggled to be able to access other markets cost effectively. So to be able to hear that we're actually making a difference in people's lives is probably, I think, the definition of success for me.
Yeah, amazing. And your favourite restaurant in London?
Well, I went to a really good one last 2 nights ago, which is an Italian place. I can't quite remember the name. Danella's? Dantanella's? Yeah, really good. Highly recommend.
And favourite beverage?
Favourite beverage? I'll probably be boring and say I predominantly drink water, but I also like red wine. Red wine.
Any particular favourites?
Malbec.
Malbec. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being on our show.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Me. And yeah, let's call it a wrap.
Cool.